Usually when we talk about reaching a breaking point, we picture this massive meltdown, right? Like a slam door or shouted word, some very dramatic cinematic exit.
Yeah, totally. But sometimes the most profound breaking points are just entirely silent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Completely internal.
It's that quiet, that really terrifying moment when you realize every tool you have, every strategy you've ever relied on to navigate your life is suddenly completely useless. You just hit a wall that logic can't scale.
And that is exactly where we find ourselves at the start of today's deep dive into our source material. We're looking at one of the most, well, profound texts in human history, the Bhagavad Gita. And the scene it sets is incredibly
Oh,
intense.
it really is.
We have Arjuna, who is, the greatest warrior of his time, standing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. But he's not fighting. He is completely paralyzed by the thought of going to war against his own family. His famous bow literally drops from his hands. He's just broken.
Right? It's the ultimate crisis of meaning. And that battlefield isn't just a historical or mythological war story. It's a brilliant psychological metaphor. That battlefield is your life.
Wow, yeah.
And that dropped bow, it represents the moments when your usual logic fails, when you realize you need a completely new way of seeing the world in order to just survive it.
To give you a roadmap for this, we're pulling from a really fantastic stack of research today. We have classical commentaries by Swami Mukundananda, alongside these highly practical modern insights from Faith Tech Labs, Bhakti Marga Ireland, and the Radha Krishna Temple.
Which is a great mix of
It
sources.
really is. We're even referencing a phonetic guide from the SGS Gita Foundation, which is a great reminder that this text is made up of 18 meticulously structured chapters. But today, we're zeroing in on chapter 4.
Right, the Gyankarm Sanyas Yog.
Exactly. The yoga of wisdom, action, and renunciation. Our mission here is to decode how these ancient Sanskrit verses apply directly to, your inbox, your stress, and your daily life.
So if we're going to use this text as a psychological blueprint, we have to start exactly where Krishna starts with Arjuna. We have to completely redefine what we think of as wisdom. Because in the Gita, wisdom isn't something you can just read in a book.
Yeah, chapter 7 draws this massive line in the sand between two very distinct concepts, jnana and vijnana. And there's a huge trap here for us today because we live in a modern world that heavily rewards hoarding exactly the wrong kind of knowledge.
That is a great way to put it. Jnana is theoretical knowledge. It's knowing that water is H2O. You can read about it, test it in a lab, memorize its chemical properties.
Get a degree in it.
Exactly. You can collect a whole library of facts.
Huh?
But Vijnana is experiential wisdom. It's understanding wetness by actually diving into the freezing ocean.
Oh, I like that distinction.
Right. Most of us spend our lives collecting Jnana like stamps, but the commentaries point out that Vijnana only comes through direct, lived, and often painful experience.
There's a fascinating blog post from Faith Tech Labs in our research that illustrates this perfectly. They describe a software engineer in Mumbai sitting at her computer at 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Her code just will not compile. She is frantically searching manuals, scrolling through developer forums, applying all her Guyana, all her theoretical knowledge.
And nothing works.
Nothing. Her conscious mind is completely maxed out. Finally, frustrated to the point of total exhaustion, she just steps out onto her balcony. She looks at the sleeping city and just surrenders. She completely lets go of the problem.
Yeah.
And in that moment of release, the solution suddenly appears to her. Not from thinking harder, but from letting go.
Because surrender disengages that frantic, ego-driven intellect, right? It allows a deeper integration to happen. Our sources also highlight a banker in Delhi who had memorized entire chapters of the Gita. She had all the Guyana.
All the facts.
But when her father passed away, all those memorized Sanskrit words felt entirely hollow. It was only when she allowed herself to just sit in the raw silence of her grief, letting it wash over her without trying to intellectualize it, that she actually felt the truth of the verses.
The verses about the eternal nature of the soul.
Exactly. The words went from her head to her heart. They became a living reality. That transition, that shift, is Vijnana.
See, here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. We think if we just get one more piece of data, read one more self-help book, or listen to one more deep dive, we'll finally be wise. But it sounds like true wisdom, Vijnana, is actually the fire that burns all that accumulated intellectual furniture down.
That's a powerful image, yes.
So how do you actually spark that fire? Because you can't just, schedule a calendar invite for experiencing deep wisdom at 4 p.m.
No, you definitely can't. And the Gita is very clear about this. You cannot spark that fire purely on your own, and you certainly can't buy it. It requires a profound shift in the ego.
Okay, so how does that shift happen?
Well, verse 4.34 outlines how this shift happens through the role of the guru, the spiritual master. It says that to learn the truth, one must approach a spiritual master with reverence, humble inquiry, and service.
That feels like a massive departure from how we view education today.
Oh, it is the exact opposite. The commentaries emphasize a stark difference between secular education and spiritual edification. In secular education, knowledge is just transactional. You pay a tuition fee, and the knowledge is mechanically transferred to you.
Right, you don't even have to respect the professor. You paid your money, you get your diploma.
Exactly. But spiritual wisdom is transferred by grace.
Yeah.
And that transfer only happens when the disciple develops genuine humility.
Our sources share the story of King Parikshit to drive this home. He was a great monarch facing imminent death from a curse. But to learn the ultimate spiritual truths before he died, he didn't summon the royal scholars and, demand a briefing.
Right, he dropped all his royal pride, he went to the forest, and he sat humbly on the ground at the feet of a wandering ascetic named Sage Sukadeva.
That image of the king becoming the student is so powerful.
It really is. There's also the story of Padmapada, originally named Sanandana. He was a disciple of the great teacher Adi Shankaracharya. And unlike the other disciples, Sanandana wasn't a great scholar.
He didn't have the jnana.
Exactly. He lacked that impressive Guyana. But his devotion and his humility were absolute. The story goes that his guru called him from across a violently rushing river. Sanandana didn't hesitate or calculate the physics of the water. He just started walking.
Oh, wow.
And miraculously, lotus flowers bloomed under the water to support his every step. That's why he became known as Padmapada, the lotus-footed one. It's this vivid testament to the power of pure, humble surrender over intellectual calculation.
But let's push back on this for a second from a modern perspective. We are taught from birth to be self-made, right? We're told to question authority, to trust only our own logic, and to be the uncompromising masters of our own destiny.
Right, the modern ego.
Yeah. Yet, the Katha Upanishad, which is this incredibly profound ancient philosophical text referenced in our research, literally says the self cannot be gained by logic. So, is the Gita essentially telling us that our modern intellectual pride is the exact padlock keeping us locked out of true wisdom?
That is precisely what it's saying. I mean, the intellect is a useful tool for navigating the physical world, but it has severe limitations when it comes to inner transformation. When we hit the limits of our logic, if we refuse to be humble, we remain trapped.
We just keep running headfirst into the same wall?
Exactly. But the text also offers a really fascinating cosmic safety net. Because what happens when the entire world loses that humility? Verse 4.1 outlines a lineage of wisdom passed down from the sun god Vivasvan to Manu to Ikshvaku. But what happens when that chain is broken and society is just consumed by its own ego?
The divine steps in.
Yes. In verses 4.7 and 4.8, Krishna makes a monumental declaration of avatarhood. He states that whenever righteousness or dharma severely declines and unrighteousness, adharma, rises, he manifests himself on earth.
Which brings up a pretty logical question. I mean, everyone is born on Earth. How is an avatar different from any other historical figure or leader?
It comes down to karma and agency. Ordinary beings are born bound by their past karma. They don't have a choice in the time or nature of their birth. But the Lord, the avatar, appears by his own compassionate will.
Ah, so it's a choice.
Exactly. He is not forced into the world by karmic debt. He chooses to enter the world specifically to restore cosmic balance.
The sources bring this dynamic to life with the story of the Narasimha avatar from the Bhagavat Purana. And the psychological metaphor here is just brilliant.
It's one of the best stories.
So you have this demon king, Hiranyakashipu, who performs intense austerities to get a magical boon. He essentially asks the universe for a cosmic loophole. He wishes that he can't be killed by a man or a beast, not during the day or the night, not inside or outside, and not by any weapon. He genuinely thought he had outsmarted the universe's laws.
It's the ultimate display of intellectual arrogance. He thought his airtight logic made him invincible, and he used that perceived invincibility to terrorize everyone, especially his own son, Prahlad, who was a pure devotee.
But the underlying mechanism here is that the ego can never find a permanent loophole. When you think your logic makes you untouchable, the universe will humble you in a way you couldn't possibly predict.
Right.
So to protect Prahlad, Vishnu bursts out of a stone pillar as Narasimha, who is half man, half lion, neither man nor beast.
That's clever.
Right. He attacks at twilight, which is neither day nor night. He catches the demon on the threshold of the courtyard, neither inside nor outside, and he slays him with his claws, which are not classified as weapons.
It perfectly illustrates that divine intervention transcends our logic and our self-imposed limitations. And the sources highlight that this isn't an isolated incident. They point to the Dashavatara, the 10 principal avatars.
Like a recurring rescue mission.
Exactly. You have Matsya the fish preserving knowledge during a cosmic flood, Rama demonstrating the ideal righteous king, Buddha appearing to reform excessive ritualism. It's a recurring systemic response.
It's almost like the universe has an immune system. When the infection of ego and adharma gets too high, the avatar is this cosmic white blood cell deployed to fight the fever and restore health.
That's a perfect analogy.
But let's ground this for you, the listener. How does this apply to your daily life? Because let's be real, you aren't fighting literal demons on a courtyard threshold. You're fighting rush hour traffic, crushing corporate deadlines, and generalized anxiety.
Right, exactly. We don't restore our internal balance by passively waiting for a mythical half-line to rescue us from our inbox. We do it through our own actions. Which brings us to the core practical teaching of Chapter 4, Karma Yoga.
Karma Yoga, let's unpack that.
Verse 4.18 introduces a profound paradox. It says the wise person sees inaction in action and action in inaction.
Inaction in action.
Yeah.
How can you be fiercely engaged in something, but internally doing nothing at all?
The sources offer the historical example of King Janaka. He was a philosopher king who ran an entire empire. He commanded armies, engaged in heavy governance, managed massive amounts of external activity.
Sounds exhausting.
Right. Yet inwardly, he was completely detached. He had zero ego invested in the outcomes. He was performing intense karma or action, but remaining in the state of a karma, non-binding inaction because his mind was entirely still.
So the focus is entirely on the inner state, not the outer busyness. Our research highlights a brilliant modern example of a surgeon in Chennai. She used to be crushed by the stress of her surgeries, carrying this incredibly heavy burden of, what if I mess up? What if I fail the patient?
Yeah, that anxiety is the ego. It's the sense of personal doership.
Exactly. But when she learned to simply focus 100% of her consciousness on the physical action of the surgery itself and mentally let go of controlling the ultimate result, her stress vanished. Paradoxically, because she wasn't choked by anxiety, her success rate actually improved.
Her hands were performing the action, but her ego was resting in inaction.
Imagine playing a highly competitive video game. You are completely focused, your reflexes are firing, and you're using every skill you have to win. But underneath it all, you know it's just a game.
Right.
If your character dies, it doesn't destroy your actual identity, you just reset.
You're not personally destroyed by it.
Right. The Gita is basically telling you to play the game of life, your career, your relationships, your daily challenges, with exactly that energy. Engaged, but utterly detached.
It's full participation without the exhausting personal agenda. But, if action in inaction is the goal, we have to look at why it is so incredibly hard to actually do. Yeah. Why do we get so stressed about the video game of life?
Because it feels so real while we're in it.
Exactly. The texts explain that our perception is constantly being distorted by three forces known as the three gunas.
The three gunas. These are essentially the invisible filters or psychological lenses through which we experience reality, right?
Precisely. Everything in creation dances between these three forces. The first is sattva. Sattva is pure, clear understanding. It's when your mind is like a completely still mountain lake. The sources say it's like seeing the same ocean in every wave.
That sounds incredibly peaceful.
It is. When you are in sattva, solutions appear without struggle. It's that moment of pure clarity, often cultivated in the quiet, early morning hours.
So if sattva is that absolute clarity, what happens when our ambition, our stress, and our ego get involved? Because that's where most of us live on a Tuesday afternoon.
Right. That state is what the text calls rajas. Rajas is passion, activity, and ambition, but it's wisdom heavily colored by a personal agenda. It drives us to achieve, but it causes massive exhaustion.
It's the hamster wheel.
Exactly. And significantly, verse 3.37 identifies desire and anger as twin demons born directly from rajas. Desire says, I want this specific outcome. And the moment that desire is blocked or delayed, it instantly morphs into anger.
Which explains why we feel so burned out.
Yeah.
And then there's the third filter, tamas, which is the extreme end of that distortion, right?
Yeah. Yes. Tamas is ignorance, delusion, and inertia. It's a deeply clouded understanding. It's when you cling to one tiny fragment of a truth and violently insist it's the whole puzzle. It breeds fanaticism, stubbornness, and laziness.
Oh, wow.
To illustrate how we should interact with the world, the sources use the analogy of holding a smartphone.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, so a person governed by tamas mindlessly stares at it for hours, totally zoned out. A person governed by rajas grips it tightly, just obsessed with every notification and email. But a person in sattva holds it tight enough to use it effectively, but loose enough to set down completely when they're done.
Let's make this actionable. For you, sitting in your car or at your desk right now, feeling totally burned out at work, driven by endless ambition, and dealing with that low-level anger that follows every blocked desire. You are trapped in rajas. Your grip on the phone is a white-knuckled death grip.
That's a great visual.
So how do you actually shift that lens back to sattva without just giving up on your career goals? Because the Gita isn't telling us to all retreat to a cave.
No, it's definitely not. And the mechanism for shifting from rajas to sattva is entirely about changing your motivation, not your location. You don't have to change the action itself. The Gita teaches that you make the shift by offering the action as a sacrifice.
Wait, a sacrifice? Like how?
You do the exact same work. You write the code, you manage the team, you perform the surgery, but you consciously dedicate the effort to something higher than your own ego, and you release your desperate grip on the specific reward. You change why you are working, not what you're doing.
Ah, so the moment the work becomes an offering rather than a transaction, rajas dissolves into sattva.
Exactly.
When we successfully filter out that chaotic rajas and the heavy tamas, and we actually practice this detached karma yoga, we arrive at the ultimate psychological state described in the Gita, the state of being a sthita-prajna.
The wise person. Verse 2.56 describes the state of prajna as one whose mind is undisturbed in sorrow and free from craving and pleasure.
The sources use a beautiful natural analogy for this. Clouds are constantly passing over a mountain. Some are dark, violent storm clouds of sorrow, and some are fluffy white clouds of joy. But the mountain itself doesn't move. It just lets the weather happen.
In verse 2.58 offers another really powerful image, the tortoise withdrawing its limbs into its shell. It represents the ability to engage or disengage the senses at will.
Like having an on-off switch.
Right. It's the absolute mastery of your own attention. Think about the power of being able to instantly stop doom scrolling on social media because you are the master of your internal experience, not a slave to an external algorithm.
There's a deeply moving story in our research about a teacher in Pune during the pandemic lockdowns. When the schools closed, her entire routine and identity just crumbled. She fell into a deep depression. But instead of fighting the sadness or trying to distract herself with rajasic activity, she just sat with it.
She let the weather happen.
Yes. And beneath the anxiety, she discovered a peace that didn't depend on her job title. She found the mountain beneath the storm clouds.
She realized her identity wasn't tied to the external weather.
To really visualize this, think of the difference between a simple boat and a deep-sea submarine. A regular boat is completely at the mercy of the weather. If the ocean gets violent, the boat gets tossed around.
It just reacts to the environment.
Exactly. But a deep-sea submarine is designed to survive an environment that should crush it. The pressure outside in the deep ocean is immense, thousands of pounds per square inch. That's the pressure of modern life, the deadlines, the expectations. But inside the submarine, the pressure is perfectly normalized. You can calmly sip a cup of coffee at the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
That is what it means to be a sthita prajna. The environment outside might be chaotic and crushing, but your internal atmosphere is completely regulated. You maintain your own internal pressure.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the journey we've taken today. We've moved from the illusion of jnana, just hoarding theoretical facts and credentials, to the living, transformative fire of vijnana, experiential wisdom.
And we've seen how humility is the key that unlocks the door to a deeper grace, right? Breaking the padlock of our intellectual pride.
We've explored how detached action, karma yoga, sets us free from the stressful video game of life. And we've learned how mastering those three lenses, shifting from the ambition of rajas to the clarity of sattva, allows us to build that deep-sea submarine.
This is exactly why the Bhagavad Gita has endured for millennia. It isn't a museum piece to be admired from a distance, and it isn't just an abstract philosophy. It is a highly practical, living survival guide. It's written for your next stressful board meeting, your next bitter relationship conflict, or your next major life failure.
But before we wrap up, there's one final mind-expanding idea from our sources that completely recontextualizes everything we've talked about today.
Yeah, we talked earlier about the Dashavatara, the 10 cosmic interventions where the divine steps in to save the world, like the half-lion Narasimha. The texts outline 9 that have already happened historically or mythologically. But they mention that the 10th avatar, named Kalki, is prophesied to appear in our future.
So there's one more to come.
Exactly. According to Hindu cosmology, we are currently living in the Kali Yuga, an age defined by conflict, chaos, and hypocrisy. Kalki is meant to appear at the very end of this age to completely reset the cosmic order.
So if that reset hasn't happened yet, what does that mean for us today?
Well, this raises an incredibly important question for you to mull over. If the ultimate cosmic reset is still in the future, then the chaotic, stressful, utterly imperfect world you are living in right now isn't an accident. The system hasn't broken down.
It's working exactly as intended.
Right. It is supposed to be exactly like this. The friction of the Kali Yuga is the precise, necessary training ground for your soul to learn these exact lessons of detachment and humility.
Oh, wow. So many of us are postponing our peace. We're waiting for our lives to be perfectly smooth, waiting for our careers to settle down, waiting for the world to finally be fixed before we allow ourselves to be happy. But the Gita is telling you that the friction of your imperfect life is the very thing designed to wake you up.
Exactly. The battlefield isn't a mistake, it's the classroom.
So the next time you find yourself standing on your own battlefield, completely overwhelmed by the pressure, and you feel your bow dropping from your hands, remember that you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to pick the bow back up, not to control the outcome, but to play your part with wisdom. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. Take these ancient tools into your modern week, and we'll see you next time.